Corporate sponsorship for this webinar is provided by the local government Federal Credit Union, a member-owned, not-for-profit financial cooperative. The credit union provides affordable financial services to all local government employees, volunteers, and their families in North Carolina. Member benefits include lower loan rates, higher interest rates on deposits, and a nominal fee structure. Financial services include mortgage, vehicle and personal loans, savings, checking, money market, IRA, and term certificate deposits, online banking, and telephone access to accounts, in addition to many other services and features. For more information, visit lgfcu.org or call 800-344-4846. Welcome to this traffic safety webinar sponsored by the North Carolina Governor's Highway Safety Program. This is one in a series of webinars addressing topics of interest for traffic safety professionals. The series is co-hosted by the Institute for Transportation Research and Education at NC State University and the University of North Carolina Highway Safety Research Center. Today's topic is Assessing Community Readiness for Vision Zero in North Carolina, presented by Elise Keefe with the UNC Injury Prevention Research Center. Ms. Keefe is a project manager and researcher at the IPRC. With over 10 years of experience designing and applying evidence-based health promotion programming, she now coordinates statewide efforts to implement Vision Zero in communities across North Carolina. Elise holds master's degrees in public health and social work from UNC Chapel Hill. Welcome, Elise. Please share your screen now to begin your presentation.
Hi there. Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay. Great. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks so much for having me. Yeah, my name is Elise Keefe. I'm the coordinator for the NC Vision Zero Community Project funded by the Governor's Highway Safety Program. And I'm housed at UNC at the Injury Prevention Research Center. And I work with communities across the state, primarily to build capacity and provide technical assistance for growing their coalitions in support of Vision Zero efforts. Okay, so I'm going to start off by giving some background on our project, some background on Vision Zero and the Safe Systems approach, and then I'll share a bit about what the Community Readiness Assessment is, how we applied it to Vision Zero, and what the results were from our assessment of key stakeholders in Vision Zero communities across the state. And last, I'll provide some recommendations for increasing that readiness in North Carolina to advance Vision Zero, given the results of the assessment that we did. So I'm happy to report there are currently 10 communities in North Carolina that are working towards Vision Zero. And actually 4 of these communities joined in the past year. So there's really a lot of momentum for this work across the state. Right now. And of course, all these communities are at different stages of implementation. So Wilmington, for example, just recently connected with us. They're kind of still exploring what Vision Zero is going to look like in Wilmington. And then kind of on the other end of the spectrum, you have a community like Charlotte, who has been working towards Vision Zero for a few years now. They have an established task force, a formal Vision Zero plan. They've dedicated resources and staff to projects and have a number of projects that are actually underway right now. So yeah, we're really excited to see this kind of initiative on the part of communities that are really beginning to recognize road fatalities as a real and importantly preventable problem and start to commit some time and resources to achieving zero fatalities in North Carolina. So from our end, we are really trying to just lend some support to help sustain those efforts. So, you know, recognizing that it's kind of easy to burn out when you take on such a daunting and complex problem as ending road fatalities. And next, I just wanted to give kind of a brief explanation of Vision Zero and safe systems in case anyone's not really familiar or needs a refresher. So Vision Zero refers to the goal of reaching 0 deaths and 0 serious injuries on the roads. It's founded in the ethical belief that everyone has the right to move safely through their community, and notably that the responsibility for that safety needs to be shared by system designers and policy makers. So it kind of is moving away from that traditional approach that puts the onus on road users themselves solely. And recently there has been kind of a movement to reemphasize that Vision Zero implementation does need to be grounded in the safe systems approach. So there's kind of a trend sometimes Vision Zero gets lumped in as, you know, another like click it or ticket style safety campaign that's focused on individual behavior. But the safe systems approach really differs from the traditional road safety approach in at least 2 major ways. So first of all, Vision Zero safe systems recognizes that people make mistakes. So it's not trying to get to 0 crashes, but 0 deaths. So to make sure that, you know, when people make those mistakes, you have to design a road system in a way so that when those crashes happen, and they are going to happen, that they're not severe enough to cause injury or death. And the second way that it departs from the traditional approach is that it's multidisciplinary. So road safety, like other prevention efforts, is addressing a really complex problem. And so it's something that absolutely requires collaboration between lots of different stakeholders. So engineers, planners, policymakers, public health professionals. So in a nutshell, Vision Zero is not a campaign, not a program. It's a fundamentally different way of approaching road safety, and it's trying to make change at a systems level. So I kind of want to start off with that. I think it segues well into the work that our team is doing and why we've convened such a multidisciplinary team. So this is kind of our core team, and it's a diverse group of researchers at a number of different departments and institutes at UNC Chapel Hill. So Dr. Nauman's an epidemiologist. She and I are housed at the Injury Prevention Research Center. Seth and Stephen, who probably many of you know, are at the Highway Safety Research Center. Dr. Hassmiller-Litch is in the Department of Health Behavior and brings a lot of expertise in coalition building and systems thinking tools from her work actually with the Maternal and Child Health Workforce Development Program. And that's something that Kiana is also involved in. And then finally, Dr. Evenson advises on road safety evaluation methods, and she's in the Department of Epidemiology. And we are also lucky to be working closely with lots of outside partners and experts. So Mark Gazelle at the Governor's Highway Safety, Leah Sham, who heads up the National Vision Zero Network. And then we also have support from our colleagues at the Collaborative Sciences Center for Road Safety. And we have been shamelessly borrowing from other groups at UNC that have done similar kind of workforce development and team-based trainings. So we had some partners from the state, so with Injury Free Academy, from the MCH Workforce Center, the North Carolina Institute for Public Health. And so we've been really learning from their experiences about what might work best in kind of this transportation world, and have modeled a lot of those components and exercises after what they've learned and how those projects have gone. All right, so what's this that we're working towards? What have we been doing with the Vision Zero communities? So first, we've developed a number of resources, so drawing on kind of best practice, best evidence research for Vision Zero initiatives. So we have a how-to guide for developing a comprehensive Vision Zero plan, and a number of other tools that can be found on the Vision Zero website. And then next, we've been drawing on the model that Kristen and Kiana have used in the MCH workforce development. And this involves kind of a coaching relationship with partners So we provide regular technical assistance to all the Vision Zero communities in North Carolina that are interested in that kind of assistance. And so that involves providing resources, making connections with what's working across the state and what's working across the country. So making sure that nobody has to, is siloed wherever they are in North Carolina and, has to reinvent the wheel, because there's a lot of resources out there. So we're kind of trying to serve as that connection between everyone. And in talking with our national partners, so a Vision Zero network, and then we've also been in contact with some other Vision Zero cities. North Carolina is actually gaining some national recognition in this space. So it's actually kind of unique that we're coordinating efforts and building somewhat of a coalition among the communities across the state. So it's not really being done on a consistent basis anywhere else in the country that we know of. So that's kind of unique. And kind of being beyond being like reactive to what the communities are asking for, we've also been trying to bring some activities and tools to the communities where we see needs coming up. So this year's focus has really been about building effective, diverse Vision Zero coalitions, which is really foundational to a Vision Zero initiative. And we've also conducted a number of assessments and evaluations, so we're kind of tracking how the communities are progressing, so that we can kind of track what's working and maybe share with a wider audience kind of the lessons that are being learned in North Carolina. And last, kind of the culmination of this year's efforts was the first ever Vision Zero Leadership Institute. So 8 of the North Carolina Vision Zero communities came together and participated. They brought teams of 3 to 6 people from different sectors, so getting at that multidisciplinary kind of idea. And we even had some city council members, and then kind of your usual suspects, planners, engineers, public health, transit, fire. So it was a really good mix of people. Kind of a presentation for another time, but it went pretty well, I think, and hopefully gave communities some space, time, some tools to really hone in on their goals, objectives, and kind of next steps to really just try to address this incredibly complex problem. But, oh goodness. So we'll probably continue. We're planning to continue those on kind of an annual basis, and hopefully next year in person. All right. So now that I've hopefully familiarized you a little bit with the type of work that we're doing here in North Carolina, I think that'll provide some context for why we brought in something called the Community Readiness Model. So what is community readiness? So it's defined as the degree to which a community is willing and prepared to take action on a problem. So for our purposes, we of course want to find out what the level of readiness is across the Vision Zero communities in addressing road fatalities and serious injuries. So the Community Readiness Assessment is it's a pretty low resource tool. It really just allows you to get kind of a quick pulse check on the readiness in your community to take on a particular issue, basically by conducting just a few somewhat brief key informant interviews. So as far as we know, no one has used it in the Vision Zero space before, but it has been used for lots of different societal problems. So substance abuse, domestic violence, environmental disaster trauma, and it's considered in a lot of fields in that space as an essential element in prevention programming. It's been validated as a reliable method. And I'm sorry, I don't have a slide on this, but it was originally developed by the Tri-Ethnic Center for Prevention Research at Colorado State, actually back in the 90s. So researchers there were trying to fill a gap in community research, which was kind of like an up and coming field, and also create something that was really practical and easy to use. So there are kind of 4 premises to the community readiness model. So first, that readiness itself is issue specific. So a community could be at a high level of readiness to deal with one problem and a low level of readiness for another problem. And the second premise is that the stage of readiness can be accurately assessed. Third, that community readiness can be increased. And last, that determining a community stage of readiness is essential because interventions that move communities to the next stage are going to differ at each stage that you're at. Hopefully that'll become clearer later. But basically, if you have an intervention that's not consistent with the stage of readiness that a community is at, it's likely to fail. So this kind of came about as they were doing these educational campaigns, and they were finding that they were really succeeding in some areas and completely failing in others. And so basically those communities were just in different places as far as how ready they were to tackle that as an issue. And so this is super necessary because then you can identify where you need to prioritize your resources so that you are not spinning your wheels. So the Community Readiness Assessment proposes there are 9 stages of readiness. So as I was saying, knowing what stage you're at is important for knowing where you're going to focus your efforts. So you can see at these lower stages, generally there's not much awareness of the problem. Efforts might not be quite organized yet. So in Vision Zero, this might look like, just a few people in the community are worried about deaths on the roads. There's not really awareness of trends or prevalence of what's happening in that space. And then moving into kind of these middle stages, maybe the pieces are starting to come together. So leadership is becoming more involved, the community is becoming more aware and motivated to address your issue as a problem. For Vision Zero, support's growing for actions to actually move forward with interventions, safety interventions that are going to reduce serious crashes. Maybe some leaders and key stakeholders have started working on a formal Vision Zero plan and things like that. And then in the last few stages, efforts have become pretty well established. The community is supportive of the efforts, and towards the later stages, they're even trying to expand efforts. So, the community is kind of a well-oiled machine at this point. Maybe they're ready to take on another issue. So the assessment tool measures each of those 9 stages of readiness across 6 different dimensions. So the first one is community efforts. And so this is it's actually kind of assessing primarily the knowledge of the people you're interviewing, the stakeholders. So they should be well-informed, well-connected people generally. And so you're kind of gauging what it is the most well-connected, well-informed people in your community, what do they know about Vision Zero efforts? Excuse me. Next is the community knowledge of efforts. So now you're finding out what the community at large might know about those efforts. So obviously this is from the perspective of whoever the person is, the people you're talking to. But again, since you're ideally talking to the people with some sort of a pulse on the community, this should give you a good sense of the community at large. And third is leadership. So of course you want to find out where leadership stands as far as their support and buy-in for a Vision Zero initiative. Next is community climate. So this is kind of getting at the more general attitude toward Vision Zero. So where do people's priorities lie? what do they think about the causes of deaths on the road? What do they think are effective solutions, and how well do those align with Vision Zero? Next is community knowledge about the issue or problems. So basically finding out, are people aware about the prevalence, aware of the trends, common factors and causes of road violence. And the last one is resources. So what does the community have at its disposal for addressing road fatalities? So not just financial resources, but also people, time, skills, space, and so on. And so I think this aspect was something that was actually added as they kind of field tested this assessment, finding out that communities really wanted to build on, come from more of like a strengths-based approach and really take stock of, what do they have locally that they can really throw at this problem. So after each interview, the response can actually be given a quantitative score for each of the dimensions using an anchored rating scale. So I'm going to show that on the next slide. But the key here is that you want to increase the readiness in each of these dimensions at a similar pace. So for example, if your community's like at large is very aware, very concerned about a given problem, but leadership is scoring really low, that's where you're going to want to focus your efforts so that these dimensions are kind of moving at the same rate. Are there any questions at this point? I want to make sure I'm not missing anything. I'm happy to take them throughout.
No questions at the moment, Elise.
Okay. So how do you conduct an assessment? What do you need? And what did we do? So first step was that we kind of did the first step for you. So we adapted the Community Readiness Assessment Manual for Vision Zero. So it's a brief handbook that walks you through step by step how to conduct the assessment and then what to do with it. It's 25 pages with the bibliography and appendices. So I say brief because coming from the public health world into the transportation world and seeing the lengths of the reports this field puts out, I'm going to say that 25 pages is brief. Second, you need the interview guide and scoring sheet, which we thought would be helpful to just plug into Excel to make it easy as possible. And I'll show you those on the next slide, as well as the other piece that I said I was going to show you. Next, you need 6 to 8 key contacts. So from your community. So ideally, you want to hear from a diversity of sectors to gain those different perspectives and really capture a holistic picture of your community's level of readiness. So finding people that can kind of represent those different pieces in the community. So the image here, you can see the 6 sectors that are suggested in the original manual that we pulled from. And I think it works pretty well. Some communities took it in different ways, but I think these sectors work pretty well for transportation issues. So the involved citizens category, we often talk to bike ped advocates. For the law category, police and traffic enforcement. For the schools, safe routes to school coordinators and things like that. And then the last piece that you need, but perhaps the most difficult, is time. So the interviews themselves are only 30 minutes to an hour, and most don't even take that long. But of course, it ends up taking time to invite people in the back and forth to schedule interviews and stuff. Although the manual does have an invitation template. It's got everything that you need in there. And then, cleaning up notes and assessing how you're going to score each interview is also going to take a bit of time. Okay, so just wanted to show you a little, some pieces from the interview guide. So you can see in the top left corner, there's a script for introducing each section. So we have each dimension on a different tab. And we worked with graduate students on this. And so they mostly did these in pairs. One person kind of asked the questions and the other one took notes. So then after each interview, you can see here, these are the anchored rating scales. So ideally, right after you finished an interview, you kind of go dimension by dimension and read through these and figure out which one best describes the perspective of the person that you just interviewed. And then you have your score. And the last page, we just kind of made it so that it could calculate the scores and calculate the averages for you. So it pulls from the other sheets. All right, so just a little bit more about how we pulled off this particular assessment across communities. So first of all, we had, as I was saying, the immense help of some graduate students, as well as our Vision Zero community partners. So we worked with 8 Masters in City and Regional Planning graduate students from UNC and 5 Vision Zero communities. And so the first step was we kind of had an initial meeting with whichever students were heading up whichever community that we kind of paired them with, and just kind of brainstormed a list of the key informants or stakeholders that we wanted to talk to. The Vision Zero community partners then made the initial contact because, you know, it was their community and they maybe already had some relationships with those people, or you know, were maybe wanting to initiate that contact, especially if they were had plans to maybe expand their coalition and we're trying to bring in people from those different sectors. So they would invite the individual to participate, and then the students kind of followed up to schedule and conduct those interviews. So, you know, as you know, it lays out in the manual, the interviewees were individuals who were well connected and could speak to at least a certain extent on behalf of some subset of the community. In the end, we had 28 total participants across the 5 communities, and the students conducted all the interviews in late winter, early spring. And then, as I mentioned, the interviews were 30 to 60 minutes. And for kind of more internal and community specific purposes, the students created reports for each of the individual communities that had some more nuanced recommendations specific to the scores there and the resources that came out about that community, et cetera. So for today's purposes, I'm just kind of going to describe the overall results. There was some amount of consistency across the communities in North Carolina. So, you know, I think it kind of provides a larger picture of Vision Zero readiness across the state. And I think I see a question. So how did the communities learn that Vision Zero exists? How do you get to the point where you are taking the interviews? So, I'm gonna make sure I understand the question. Were you gonna say something, Eugene?
Regina, would you like to ask the question and maybe discuss this a bit with Elise? If you would click raise your hand and I'll activate your microphone. There you go. Okay, Regina, if you'll unmute.
Sure. I was just wondering, like, how do they become a participant in the assessments that you're doing, and how do they, like, how do they know that Vision Zero is there, that they could become a community, and then just to get involved from not knowing at all, I guess.
Gotcha. Yeah. So, so we worked. Sorry, did I cut you off? So for this assessment, we worked with communities that we kind of already had established relationships with. So that map I showed earlier that had like the 10 communities, some of them maybe don't have like a super public facing, like we're a Vision Zero city now and here's our plan and so forth, but they are at least working behind the scenes internally, maybe in the Department of Transportation or whatever, to become a Vision Zero city or town. And so we had established relationships with those communities. And so we connected with them, and they kind of gave us the names of people in their communities for us to interview. Those people didn't necessarily know much about Vision Zero. That was a little bit part of what we were trying to assess is, is word even getting out about these efforts? Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, sure. Okay. Okay, so these are the combined scores of the assessments across North Carolina. And as you might remember, there's 9 total stages of readiness. If you look at those numbers, I apologize, it doesn't go up to 9. It's just kind of zoomed in so that you can see the categories better. But you can see the first dimension, so the local stakeholder knowledge, the third dimension, leadership, and the 6th dimension, resources, are the highest across the state. So those categories are all in the kind of pre-planning or preparation levels of readiness. So stakeholders do have some awareness and investment in Vision Zero efforts. Generally, leadership is kind of starting to recognize that something needs to be done, and there are some resources that are being used to that are being kind of mobilized and used to address the problem of road fatalities. So as I mentioned before, you want these dimensions moving at about the same pace. So essentially the activities and recommendations that we have should really focus on kind of leveraging what's working. So some of the stakeholder knowledge and resources and leadership, leveraging what you've got to increase the readiness in some of those areas that scored lower. So community knowledge, awareness of the problem, and the community climate. And so the levels of readiness in those last 3 categories are more at the kind of denial, resistance, or vague awareness phases. And then this graph shows the participants' opinion about the level of concern in the community. So this is kind of just another kind of quantitative explanation of that first chart. So the stakeholders tended to rate their concern with local road fatalities the highest, so close to 9 out of 10. And then they were rating the community concern pretty low, so closer to around 3 out of 10. And then leadership was somewhere in between, so just over about 6. And this was something that we added to the assessment. So this is kind of an adaptation that we did, really trying to kind of capture what the thinking was around what the most effective interventions were for increasing road safety. And I think this kind of came from our interest in this safe systems perspective. So seeing if the interest was at these kind of more systems level interventions, and we did kind of find that, at least, you know, among the stakeholders interviewed, who clearly, at least in their own opinion, have a higher concern than the general community, and probably higher knowledge about road safety, but they tended to rate things like engineering solutions and bike ped infrastructure as being the most effective road safety interventions. And then next, and not too far apart from one another, came enforcement, public transit, and educational campaigns. And so now I just want to share some of the quotes. So I think this is the fun part. So these are from the interviews across the communities on all 6 of the dimensions. So hopefully this kind of illustrates some of the findings. So first for stakeholder knowledge, this first quote: underinvested communities don't have the traffic calming or highly visible stop signs and are more prone to accidents or fatalities. So here, you know, demonstrating some knowledge about the inequities and trends of the problem within their community. And let me tell you some things on my screen. You can see. Second quote: the police have a new group specifically looking at speeding and running red lights and, you know, traffic violations. So some stakeholders were aware of some, you know, public-facing initiatives that involved law enforcement, which I think tend to be most evident to people, I guess. And the last one: we don't see comprehensive ADA compliance in sidewalks and access to transit. The pedestrian interfaces associated with aging populations, access to goods, services, and healthcare is often disconnected. So showing some knowledge of the actual policies that are influencing safety in the community and the need to address those. And next we have community knowledge. So the first one, I don't know if anybody's going to blame the city just because somebody speeds or somebody's not paying attention or somebody, you know, walks in front of somebody. I'm not sure that's ever going to be perceived or blamed on something the city has or has not done. So I think this one's kind of interesting. So kind of demonstrating the disconnect between community members and understanding traffic safety from that system's perspective. So here they're describing that residents are not going to connect an event, a crash, with a larger policy decision, or, you know, they're not seeing any kind of shared responsibility from their local government to prevent these tragedies. And the next one, if people tend to bicycle or bike a lot on the streets, they're probably somewhat engaged, or if they tend to walk a lot. So kind of pinpointing that at least certain people in the community who might be affected by this more are more likely to be kind of thinking about this and engaged on the issue, so that it's maybe still kind of limited to certain groups. And the last one, I still don't see a great deal of public penetration to traditionally underserved minority communities. I get the sense that these are nice programs if people are able and willing to come to them. They don't necessarily always, from my perception, go out to where people are at. So, of course, highlighting the need for more equitable community engagement to really increase and reach those communities. And this next one is leadership, and this one was somewhat mixed across communities. So the first one, I don't hear much leadership on these issues. I hear maybe a political talking point of our thoughts and prayers are with somebody when there's a horrible crash. So this one is clearly kind of pessimistic that leadership in their communities, they're thinking that they're pretty unconcerned. And then on the other hand, you have the second one. I feel confident that public safety via really any form is a top priority for our city leaders. I feel strongly about that. So I think this third quote might maybe offer some explanation to this disconnect, which is when you talk with them, and they were referring to elected leadership, when you talk with them about it, it seems of concern, but when you ask for some help in the solution, it tends to change. It's always what they can't do. There's no real answers to what we can do. So I think there was some sentiment that maybe it's rhetorically a concern, but leaders maybe aren't really, they're not really ready yet to take action and really put in that work. And next is the community climate. So the mental model that most people are working with is that the roads just belong to the cars and that we're not allowed to ask questions or create an alternate reality to the one we have now. There's just a wholesale acceptance that if you put your foot outside that curb, that anything that happens to you at that point is your fault. So this kind of gets at another pretty common sentiment that road fatalities and injuries are still perceived in the community to be essentially the responsibility of individuals themselves. So, you know, from a safe systems perspective, we of course want to kind of shift that thinking so that we can realize what we really can do to protect people. And next, I wish there was a greater understanding of what it's like to have to depend on walking or biking to commute. So kind of expressing that general car-centric nature of road design that leaves people on foot and bike to feel like, you know, their well-being, their safety isn't really being considered. And then to end on a bit more positive note, if there's one positive thing that comes out of the pandemic, the use of sidewalks and greenways and whatnot by people has dramatically increased. So I think people are a little more positive about their local communities and making sure they are healthier places to live. And on community knowledge of the issue, the people that are working on it know exactly what's going on because they have all the numbers, but the people that are in the communities, unless they see it happen and it's right in their community, they're clueless of the depth of what's happening. And the only time they'll know about a traffic death is if they see it on the 5 o'clock news and it's some spectacular crash or some child gets hit. I think these first two kind of go together, kind of highlight that there's some awareness that someone is kind of tracking these crashes and has all the numbers and knows the trends, but that's there's a disconnect between that and then what the public actually hears about. So most people are just going to hear about these events as, you know, isolated, tragic events, but they might kind of seem disconnected. Not many details beyond like the traffic delays. And then third, I'm not sure the community understand the scope or the impacts that are involved. It doesn't grab their attention unless it's in their backyard or it happens to somebody they know. And last is resources. So I'm not sure about volunteering time or participating in events. That would probably be a small subset of our population. So, you know, I think there was some awareness that there is at least some subset of the population that is committed to this and willing to volunteer their time. And most folks are going to reach out to the police force and then their elected leadership second. So this was, I think, kind of getting at some of the most common resources the general public feels like they have for road safety, which is, yeah, often to reach out to law enforcement. And then last, everyone in the community is in favor of addressing road deaths and serious injuries. It takes someone that's going to spearhead the effort and then see it to fruition as far as actions taking place that are put forth by the concerns of the population. So noting that it's really going to take some coordination between local residents and leadership. So this brings me to some of the recommendations that I think are hopefully relevant across the communities in North Carolina. So let me move some things around again. So yeah, I think, you know, the stakeholders interviewed had a pretty high awareness of the issue and some knowledge of the efforts going on. So we want people to really leverage that to get the word out and grow support and build up that leadership. So, you know, related to that, a lot of interviewees noted the strengths of local organizations and advocacy groups. So definitely, you know, building on what communities have at their disposal and finding ways to put them to work. So especially organizing some of the less formal information sharing will hopefully move some of the other pieces of the general community climate and knowledge. So the context in each community is going to be different. And so it's helpful to understand, what are the things that do work well in your community and building off of those. So for example, one community might have like a local school board and PTO that's super engaged, they get stuff done, they have a strong relationship with city council. So if that's, what your community looks like, maybe you want to start there. You want to start with like a safe routes to school program. So really finding out what's working in your community and tying Vision Zero into it. So I think, everyone is affected by our transportation system. And so you just kind of have to make those connections and really figure out how to articulate how Vision Zero fits into some of these other movements and communities. Because I think it fits in everywhere. And the last thing is that a lot of the communities in North Carolina, they have coalitions or they're actively forming coalitions. And so some of these partners they're working together for the first time. So I think, taking a step back and really taking stock of who's in the room, what do they bring? You might not be so familiar if you have a social worker in the room or, what kind of skills do they bring? So figuring out what's there and how you can really leverage that to increase that community knowledge and change the climate. So it's pretty common, I think, across the country that most of the community knowledge of this problem of road fatalities comes from, just brief local media reports, often in the context of basically a traffic report. So someone died and you might be 10 minutes late to work. So we're really encouraging Vision Zero communities to work with local media to reframe these events. So helping to humanize them with stories of people locally in the community that the community has lost. Also providing some context on the larger trends. So explaining, what types of intersections are most dangerous. And, of course, if you've got Vision Zero going, you also want to spread the word about that. So what are we actually doing to address that with Vision Zero? And kind of related to that last point is a lot of interviewees said that the community doesn't generally have a lot of access to information. So we're kind of encouraging communities to think beyond just a municipal Vision Zero website, build relationships and expand your ideas about information sharing. So, this is as much about, data maps and numbers as it is ghost bikes, and again, humanizing and sharing those stories. I can't emphasize this enough. You have to meet people where they are. So, finding out where are people already convening, who are the trusted formal and informal community leaders, and start, building some trust with those groups. So that's going to help Vision Zero efforts in both directions, right? So helping to spread information about what you're doing, and then also learning from the community and developing that closer relationship is going to inform and make your efforts even more effective. And finally, a lot of participants noted that leaders do seem to increasingly care about addressing this and building support for Vision Zero. So I think, continuing to foster those relationships and build that trust. So what our partners seem to already be doing is going to be really helpful as they do work on those other dimensions and building up that more grassroots community support. then I think that those pieces will fit together well. I think the leadership was a little bit higher, and so at this point, they need to start hearing from their constituents. The community needs to be more involved, and that'll hopefully naturally kind of push leaders in a direction to be doing more. And this is kind of what I said earlier, but one last suggestion is to, again, kind of find out where the priorities of the community already are. So is it tourism? Is it access to jobs? And really figuring out what those priorities are and how Vision Zero fits in with that. It's going to help you to be able to kind of make your pitch to leaders in the community, because they're probably keyed into and aligned with those kind of overarching community priorities. So that is all I have for you today, and I'm happy to take questions.
Elise, thank you very much, and for a great presentation. Much appreciated. We do have time for Elise to answer a few questions. So just a reminder, if you will, you can type your questions into Q&A, or if you'd just like to raise your hand, I'll activate your microphone and you can talk directly with Elise. And Elise, while we're waiting for attendees to prepare for some questions, let me do one follow-up with you. How can other communities conduct a Vision Zero readiness assessment?
Well, we are finalizing some materials with our design team at the moment, but you can certainly email me, and I can connect you with the materials that I described and mentioned. And our team is also happy to help lend support if someone is interested in conducting an assessment. So yeah, definitely reach out.
Okay, thank you for that. And don't see any questions in queue right now, so I have one more follow-up for you. Is how are the North Carolina Vision Zero communities using this assessment to inform their Vision Zero initiative?
Yeah, so I mentioned we did this with 5 communities, and so we have 5 reports. We actually still owe 2 of those reports to the communities themselves. So the students graduated, moved on, and so we're trying to find time to finish those up. So far, of the other 3, though, at least 2 of them, I think, are planning to take this readiness assessment to their leadership and really use it to kind of demonstrate, pulling the quotes and things like that, to really demonstrate the need for more Vision Zero investment. So yeah, we were happy that it seemed to have been a helpful tool. And I think I mentioned there are some more kind of nuanced recommendations that we had that were more community specific about, this particular organization or partnership came up. And so I think that the ones that make sense, they're going to be taking up those recommendations. And then lastly, kind of a shameless plug, I think we're going to be doing kind of a media project. So I think some of the communities might be working with us on how to actually engage with your local media and work with them to kind of reframe some of those crash stories.
Very good. Thank you, Elise. All right. Well, we are close to the time. We've got, if anyone else has a question they'd like to ask, go ahead and raise your hand now. We'll give it just a moment to see if there are any additional questions. Okay, seeing none. Well, Elise, I want to thank you again very much for a great presentation. I'm going to go ahead and share our closing slides with everyone. And again, thanks to Elise, thanks to everyone who joined us today for the presentation. If you do have some additional questions for Elise afterwards, when we send out the follow-up email, we'll include Elisa's contact information or email address so you can reach out to her directly. Before you leave today's session, if you would use the Q&A window to share any suggestions you may have to help us improve the webinar series, including any future topics you'd like to learn about. Following today's webinar, as I mentioned, you will receive an email with a recording link, so be sure to watch for that. And that email will also include a link to request a participation certificate. If you wish to receive one, be sure to use the link in that email. And if you're a professional engineer joining us today and would like to earn PDH for participating, be sure to also complete your NC Bells evaluation. There'll be a link to that also in that same follow-up email. Please note, if you happen to be watching this presentation on its recording right now, we are only able to award certificates for those who attend the live webinar, not the recording. So we invite everyone to join us again for other traffic safety webinars in this series. We have several more planned this year. So please visit our website at the link that you see on the screen for those upcoming webinars. Also at this website, you'll find information about the next North Carolina Traffic Safety Conference and Expo. We hope you'll plan to attend that, and we invite you to propose topics for presentation. There's a link on the site for presentation proposals to submit your ideas. So again, thank you very much for participating in today's webinar, and until next time, goodbye for now. Corporate sponsorship for this webinar is provided by the local government federal credit union, a member-owned, not-for-profit financial cooperative. The credit union provides affordable financial services to all local government employees, volunteers, and their families in North Carolina. Member benefits include lower loan rates, higher interest rates on deposits, and a nominal fee structure. Financial services include mortgage, vehicle, and personal loans, savings, checking, money market, IRA, and term certificate deposit accounts, online banking and telephone access to accounts, in addition to many other services and features. For more information, visit lgfcu.org or call 800-344-4846.